porn, the continuum of hypersexuality, and how do I know if it's a problem or not? I'm Dr. Trish Leigh. Let's break it down. So, first, we're going to talk about the continuum of hypersexuality. What is it? That's number one. Number two is how does pornography use fit into that continuum? Then, number three is how do I know if I have a problem or not? Number four, if I think I have a problem, what can I do about it? Okay, so let's dig into number one. Hypersexuality. What is it? So I know in the news and for a while now there has been issues between different researchers on opposite sides of the continuum of if hypersexuality is actually a problem or if this is the development of sexuality into the future. And honestly, I don't really want to weigh in on that discussion per se. What I want to do is explain it to you and then help you figure out where you might lie on this continuum. So, like anything in the entire world, hypersexuality exists on a continuum. Sexuality, for that sake, exists on a continuum. So when we talk about hypersexuality, that's someone's need to be more sexual than other people. Hyper, more than. So the way that that plays out for people is that they have a strong libido or a large sexual drive. And so for some people, that's okay. That's not a problem if that is being expressed in healthy ways in a healthy relationship. What we know from the science is that pornography consumption or use is the number one way that hypersexuality is expressed. So that's the number one way that people who are hypersexual are expressing that. Now you're gonna have to follow me on this a little bit. So we also know that when it comes to this continuum, that some people are just hypersexual and that's not a big deal. But it goes all the way down to this end of the continuum where now the World Health Organization and the International Classification of Diseases has deemed compulsive hypersexual behavior disorder as a disorder. So, like so many things, there's just typical use or expression of it. Then there's all the way down to the disordered version of the same concept. So when different scientists are arguing that, it's just fine, for some people, it's just fine. Not necessarily pornography, we'll get there, but the expression of sexuality in a bigger than usual way. But when it comes to down here and hypersexual compulsive behavior disorder, that's when a person has a real problem, a compulsion. And for me, the compulsion is the piece that is most relevant on that continuum because somewhere between here and here, people have lost control over their ability to abstain from sexual behaviors and pornography use. They don't want to do it. It makes them feel bad in the end, but they can't stop themselves from going back for more and more because we know pornography is a super normal stimulus. It is giving your brain more neurochemical release than it can get anywhere in the world. And trust me, the people who are producing pornography know that. So I kind of equate it to alcoholism, which is, isn't the exact same because it's not exactly the same in terms of the supernormal stimulus, but it's easy for us to think about. So some people can have a drink or two. Actually, some people have zero interest in ever having a drink because of the way that their brain is performing. Alcohol is not interesting to them at all. Then there's people all along that continuum of people who can have a couple drinks socially, people who have a few more than a couple drinks every day, people who, all the way down to people who cannot stop drinking and literally die from cirrhosis of the liver. They kill themselves on accident because they can't stop drinking, even though it's deteriorated their work, their relationships, and their health. So when it comes to alcoholism, it's easy to see that continuum. But when we talk about hypersexuality or pornography, it seems so different. And right now, in today's day and age, it might seem different to us. But in the future, it's not going to seem that different after we see the ramifications falling out a little bit more than we have measured right now. The science is increasing a lot, scientific discovery in this area, so we'll know a lot more. We already know that it's changing the brain mechanisms in people's brains for the worst. So we also know it's a slippery slope and that it's sleuthy, as I like to say. So for most people, when they watch pornography 1, 2, 3 times, if it gives their brain that supernormal stimulus and it feels good to their brain, they will come back for more because of habituation in the brain changing its levels to need more and more to feel the same way that it felt on the first time that they watched. Or it's like, basically having to increase the level, just like an alcoholic. An alcoholic has to have more and more drinks to get the same level of high that they got originally from one drink. The same thing happens with pornography. And we also know that there are brain patterns that are more at risk for any addiction, but especially for hypersexuality or pornography addiction. So it's the brain pattern that's looking for calming and stimulation. People with ADHD or with attention difficulties or learning challenges, they're more at risk because their brain needs stimulation. Those people with anxiety, their brain is running so fast, they need calming. And it goes back to some of my other videos on nature and nurture. There's also usually a trauma aspect for the people who are most impacted into a hypersexual pornography consumption habit. So some type of trauma, whether that be physical abuse or verbal abuse or sexual abuse or neglect that happened in their childhood. That's kind of the perfect storm that will create a compulsive hypersexual behavior disorder. So, how do you know if it's a problem or not? The way that you know if it's a problem is if you have negative consequences showing up in your life, and you should want to quit because you're going to be fired from your job, or you've already been reprimanded for watching pornography at work, or in your relationships if your wife's found out, your partner's found out, and now you have relationship strain, but you keep going back for more. That is likely a sign, a red flag that this is out of your control. And I've heard so many men say to me, that's just the way that I am. I'm I got a big libido. You might, but it doesn't mean it has to be expressed in this unhealthy way, because we know when you go back for more and more that it is skewing that sexuality for you and it's making it worse, not better. And what I always say, that just because it feels good to you doesn't mean it is good for you. So if you can't stop the habit, and especially if you have negative consequences, if you have more anxiety, more depression, your social relationships are falling apart, you're spending more and more time watching porn, and your intensity in porn use is increasing, that's habituation, my friend. So you likely are being sucked in more. Please be aware of that. That's how you know if you have a problem or not. If you're the person who watches it every once in a while, it barely does anything for you, and then you can go forever without thinking about it or wanting to get back to it, then thank goodness you're down here on this side of the continuum. But most of the people I work with, and so many people in the world now, they're getting further and further towards the side of the disordered behavior. Okay, so what do you do about it? You have to change the way that your brain is performing. You have to unwire the brain pattern that you have been hardwiring in. And more importantly, you need to rewire your brain for the healthy brain pattern. How do you do that? Well, obviously, to unwire, you stop going back to your habit. How do you rewire? You get on purpose in your life. You get on purpose in your work. You get on purpose in your play. You get on purpose in your relationships. How do you get on purpose? You figure out your goals in each one of those realms of your life, and you start working towards them while you're unwiring the pattern by not going back to the habit and changing your environment, the nurture piece, by changing your habits, your routines, your thought processes, and your feelings, changing them for the better so that your brain performs better. It literally will change your brain performance pattern. And that's how you train your brain without technology. If you're serious about this journey, the number one way that you can train your brain to get over the hurdle of this recovery aspect of leaving pornography behind is to train your brain using neuroscience and technology. It's called neurofeedback brain training, and I have an entirely different YouTube channel dedicated to it. And that's what I have dedicated the last 10 years of my life to doing with people to help them to overcome ADHD, anxiety, trauma, depression, strokes, neurological disorders, and addiction. So if that's something that you're looking for, that's what needs to be done. Okay, so if you want some help on that journey, please visit my website at drtrishleigh.com. There's programs there in different shapes and sizes, and hopefully there's one that can serve you. There's ones that are affordable, accessible, and anonymous, just like porn. And then there's ones where we can get to know each other and I can support you individually. Okay, let's do this. Let's rock it out if it feels good to you. And remember, control your brain or it'll control you.